afternoon, everyone. Our featured guest expert today is Rashid Hughes. He is the co-founder of the Heart Refuge Mindfulness Community in Washington, D.C. In addition to teaching meditation, Rasheed is a writer, musician, yoga teacher, and restorative justice facilitator. Rasheed graduated with a degree in music from Howard University. He also did his graduate work in the School of Divinity. The teachings of James Baldwin, Toni Morrison, and the music of Miles Davis and John Coltrane are deep sources of inspiration and hope for Rasheed. Rasheed's teachings encourage us all to make time to rest, abide effortlessly, be aware and awake to the beauty of just being alive. Welcome everyone to the Wellness Collective, and welcome Rasheed. Good to have you back.
Thanks, Dean. It's always a pleasure to be able to, I like to say, just to return home. Yeah, especially when there's a warm invitation. So really happy to be able to have this opportunity to share a little bit about a practice that's really near and dear to me. And this is a practice called looking deeply. But before I share some of the things that I've been reflecting on, I wanted to make sure that I took a moment to just acknowledge the Buddhist teacher and activist Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh, because the teachings of looking deeply that have really inspired me have definitely come from his teachings and his work. So want to just acknowledge that because I'm really grateful for his work. So when we talk about the practice of looking deeply, I like to consider this as really an invitation for us to practice pausing and stopping and looking at life with the eyes that yearn to understand and see clearly. So when we say looking deeply, it's not just staring at things, and it's not necessarily even about kind of like vision with the eyes, but it's more so about awakening a quality of the heart that seeks to always understand and to see clearly, right? So the underlying principle is that in each moment, there are conditions and always there are live living opportunities present to support us with connecting with joy and compassion, right? No matter if the moment is a pleasant moment, no matter if the moment is unpleasant, no matter if it's very intense, or no matter if it's not a lot happening, each moment under the practice of looking deeply has many conditions and opportunities present for us to connect with joy and compassion. And the conditions that I speak of, or the elements of the moment, I look at as many continuations that have come together to create this unique manifestation of the moment, right? So every moment is the continuation of many moments. Every person is the continuation of many beings, many experiences, many traumas, many heartbreaks, and also many joys. So connecting with these conditions, placing our attention on these conditions and considering what these conditions might be is the practice of looking deeply. And it's been my experience that as I've made the practice of looking deeply a habit, I found that I've been more likely to cultivate a heart of understanding in moments where I might have previously responded or reacted out of fear, out of anger, or frustration. So our ability to consider what are the many conditions and elements that have created this moment, unique moment, connecting with these conditions and elements eventually opens the door for the energy of compassion to emerge into the moment as well. So when I say elements, like I like to use kind of like practical examples to bring it down to earth a little bit. I know there's a quote where Zen Master Thich Nhat Hanh says, "We have more possibilities available in each moment than what we realize." So the question is, more possibilities available in each moment to connect with what? To realize what? So what I'm kind of inviting us to consider that there are many possibilities to connect with what's under the surface, what's not seen, what's beyond our limited perceptions and assumptions about people, about what's going on in the world, and even about ourselves, right? So how do we look deeply? So an example that I'll use to start off with is thinking about a flower. So one thing that Thich Nhat Hanh does a great job of doing is inviting us to consider, if we're talking about a flower, the non-flower elements that are alive in the present moment that have come together to create what we call a flower. So for example, looking deeply might look like this. So we might see a rose, and some of the non-rose elements might be water, right? Because the water is, in order for there to be rose, there has to be water in order for the rose to grow. Another non-rose element might be the cloud, right? Because the water came from the cloud. Or maybe we can say from a sprinkler. And we can even continue to say a non-rose element is the sun, or even the person who planted the seed. And we can continue to say, to consider that, well, where did that seed come from? Maybe it was housed in a store and packaged. So looking deeply is considering the non-flower elements, the non-rose elements, as we stand in the presence of a rose, right? So this is what I mean. It challenges us to look beyond our perceptions, right? And we might do the same thing when we sit down to eat lunch, right? So say if we have collard greens on our plate, we can consider, what are some of the non-collard green elements that we can connect with to cultivate and to touch a sense of gratitude in our heart, right? So some of the non-collard green elements might be the garden, right? The person who picked the collard greens, the water that goes into the pot to boil the collard greens, the house in which this is taking place, or the building in which all of this is being cooked, right? So the practice of looking deeply is stopping and connecting with, quote unquote, the non-flower elements and the non-collard green elements underneath the unique manifestation of the flower and the collards. And this is something we can carry into our everyday life. When we are faced with, no matter if it's a challenge or maybe it's just we might have some leisure time, how might we put into practice touching into those non-apparent elements that are present in order to help us to cultivate and connect with joy, a sense of joy in our hearts, or if there's an intense situation where there's suffering present, so that we might open our hearts in a way to connect with a quality of energy of compassion, right? And when I say compassion, I'm thinking of when our looking deeply transforms into actions fueled by the energy of understanding. And that energy allows us to soothe rather than inflict more suffering, right? So it can be an intense conversation we happen with our partner, a disagreement at work, a disagreement with one of our friends. How might the practice of looking deeply support us in cultivating the space for compassion to step into the moment with us, right? So I look at difficult situations. Sometimes I like to think about, I love nature, so I always go to nature. So if we think of a storm, right? When we see a storm, we see lightning, we might hear thundering, we might see dense clouds, dark clouds, maybe there's rain, but many elemental conditions come together to create the storm, like moisture, unstable air, like the warm air is closer to the ground, the cold air goes higher. All of these are kind of like the elemental conditions or the non-storm elements that are present, right? And when we look deeply into a storm, we might connect with the reality that the moisture, the unstable air conditions, all of those conditions and elements are not personal to the storm, right? They're just continuations of many, many ingredients coming together to create one particular manifestation. So if we think we carry this over into intense moments where we might feel stuck or really bothered or in an argument or in an intense moment with someone, we might be able to connect with notice when we've become fixated on the storm, and the practice of looking deeply invites us to pause and to take a moment to connect with some of the non-storm elements so that we might understand, and then that understanding makes way for us to offer compassion in the situation. Because what we eventually begin to realize is that we all share the same elements, right? They just appear and manifest differently. Okay, so if we consider the practice of looking deeply in just just a few areas, I was thinking that we might be able to kind of understand a little better how this might be able to look in just practical moments. So if you're sitting down to have a drink of lemonade, you might consider what are some of the non-lemonade elements that have come together to create this lemonade. So we can think of maybe sugar, maybe lemons, water, of course, the person who made the lemonade, maybe even where the lemons were grown. And then we can connect with the trees. Or grief, right? What are some of the non-grief elements that when we practice looking deeply, we might touch? That might be a gateway for us to offer compassion, so self-compassion, or even compassion to another person, right? What are some of the non-grief elements? Maybe it's loss. Maybe it's missing someone. Maybe it's just a change, a drastic change that happens, right? Maybe it's trauma or systemic racism. We can do it for systemic issues as well, right? Maybe it's greed. Maybe it's exploitation. Maybe colonialism might be connected to it, or hatred, right? Or neglect, right? A lot of different non-systemic racism elements contribute to racism, right? Or even thinking about something maybe a little more relevant, like war. what are some of the non-elements of war that we might connect with, right? To just to awaken a moment of a little bit of understanding. So there's a story that I want to share, because I feel like this story really embodies just the practice of looking deeply in a really unique way. So this is a conversation between a spiritual teacher and a student. And the story begins: respected teacher, without understanding, love is most difficult. It reminds me of something that happened to my sister Bima. One night, she cried all night long until my sister Bala lost her patience and spanked Bima. That only made Bima cry more. I picked up Bima and sensed that she was feverish. I was sure her head ached from the fever. I called Bala and told her to place her hand on Bima's forehead. When she did that, she understood at once why Bima was crying. Her eyes softened, and she took Bima into her arms and sang to her with love. Bima stopped crying, even though she still had a fever. Respected teacher, I think that was because Bala understood why Bima was upset. And so I think that without understanding, love is not possible. So the practice of looking deeply reminds us that without understanding, love is not possible. And in this scenario, this story, maybe looking deeply allows us to consider that maybe there's a fever underneath the cry, right? So I was thinking that we can do a short 5-minute practice, and then I'll open it up for any questions or maybe conversation with Dean Richardson before we close. Okay. So I'll just invite you just to find a posture that feels comfortable for you. And once you found that posture, maybe you'd like to close your eyes, or you don't have to, you can keep your eyes open. And this practice is a practice of looking deeply within ourselves. Okay, and so always remembering that if any point during the guidance you feel uncomfortable or you need to move your body or shift or do something differently, that's always available as well. So maybe just beginning by feeling your feet on the floor, or maybe just feeling your body in your chair. And just kind of sensing into just the sensational feeling of the body resting in whatever you're seated on. Feeling the weight of the body. And just seeing if it's possible to allow just the chair to hold you. You can kind of let go of having to hold yourself up. And while allowing the body to rest, just inviting you to could just bring to mind and consider a family member. It can be blood or spiritual or extended family member, but someone in your family that you consider family that has touched you in a way that you know that it's because of their love and their generosity and care that you are who you are today. and just kind of feel their presence. And maybe there's a mentor that you might bring to mind, someone that has inspired you, someone that has been with you and offered you guidance and coaching. And you know that it's because of their generosity of time with you that you are who you are today. Maybe just bringing their name, maybe an image to mind. Or maybe there's an ancestor that you might bring to mind, someone that you know has touched you in some way, that has supported you in being who you are today. Maybe it's you've had the privilege of studying their teachings or their readings. Maybe you read one of their books, or maybe it's someone that you knew who's no longer here. But you know that it's because of this ancestor that you are who you are today. And maybe lastly, there's a particular emotion, the quality of the heart, that you know it's because of that quality of the heart in your life, whether it's joy, whether it's gratitude, whether it's love, but because you've been touched by this quality of the heart, you are who you are today. So as you sit with these many elements and these many conditions, this is the practice of looking deeply within ourselves. We touch many different conditions, like our ancestors, a family member, a mentor, qualities of the heart that are always touching stones that we might connect with to cultivate understanding within ourselves and even be able to offer compassion. Okay, so maybe you like to wiggle your toes or wiggle your fingers and allow your eyes to open if they were closed. And now I'd like to just invite any questions. Dean Richardson, would you like to come back? Or?
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Are you looking for questions? While you're looking, I have a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
How have you been able to use your practices in dealing with issues of social justice, racial injustice? Are there some things that you can share with us that have helped you, particularly even dealing with the sense of compassion for oneself and others? What has been helpful for you?
Yeah. I mean, I think this practice is foundational. Like the practice of considering and always seeking to understand before responding.
Hmm.
And this doesn't mean, when I say seek to understand, it doesn't mean that I'm able to grasp the entirety of the situation, but at least the energy that's driving my actions will come from a place of attempting to connect with, and to see where there's something that I can touch that reminds me that we are all one.
Okay.
Right?
Excellent.
And unique at the same time, right?
Can you say a little more about that? That's great.
Yeah, like the oneness and uniqueness.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's important for me to always be able to see how all beings that I encounter have, like, we share some of the same desires, such as we want to be happy, we want to be safe, and we have the fundamental desire to be free of suffering, right? And to belong. So that's something that connects me with our oneness, right? Like, no matter how someone might be presenting, no matter how they may be showing up in the world, no matter even their history, I know that the practice of looking deeply, I can connect with that, the understanding that they too, like myself, want to be happy. They too, like myself, want to be safe. They too, like myself, want to have joy. And they also want to be free of suffering. So this allows me to organize my how I show up in the world around that, rather than only on the appearing conditions, right?
Yeah. When I hear you, I think about the fact that Thich Nhat Hanh and Martin Luther King had such a connection, because they were both coming from the same place, with that understanding, to see the basic humanity, even with in their enemies.
Yeah.
Very powerful.
And that takes time.
Yeah.
It takes time. It's not an easy practice, but it's available. That's why I like this practice, because it's always available, and we don't have to start off by using intense situations, right?
Yeah.
We can look at the tree and see the sun in the tree and practice starting there, right? When we're about to eat, we can look at the tomatoes and remember the vine that's connected to the earth, and the water that comes from the cloud. We can see the cloud in the tomato, right?
Yeah.
We can do those in practical.
It seems like there's a need to pause and to step back and to see the larger picture, and then go inward. I don't know. Is that the would you say that's the sequence? Is the pausing, or is looking within and then to seeing the larger picture? No, that's
Yeah, I like, for me, I think the pause is always foundational, because the pause first helps us to connect with kind of like our internal weather, in a sense, and it actually helps us to see how our internal weather may be preventing us from connecting with the many different elements that have created the unique experience that we might be in.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's a connection in terms of my tradition, in terms of prayer. In prayer, you're reaching for something, the power beyond you, but you have to look within first, to be open to that. And so usually you feel it inwardly, and then you reach out in prayer.
Yeah. And it's kind of like like in the story, like the one of the sisters, when there was crying, that she went and spanked the baby. The other sister held the baby, and it was because of the holding that she was able to sense the fever, right? So the pausing allows us to actually, the pausing represents kind of like the holding that makes room for understanding to emerge, right?
Yeah.
And then we don't spank, but we hold and may sing to, right?
Yeah. That's great. Wow, Rasheed, thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you, Dean.
It's been a great conversation and a great lesson. And we look forward to having you back.
Yeah. Thanks so much. Look forward to coming back.
Take care.
Okay.